For today's other small group, we're gonna read Red Riding Hood, and then we're gonna retell the story using some story retell items I have. And this little Red Riding Hood is retold and illustrated by James Marshall. It says retold. He's not actually the author of the story because this story is so very, very old, like over 100 years old, maybe 200. And it was a story that people used to tell around the campfire when we didn't have heaters in the house. People had fires in their house, and that's how they made the house stay warm. So we're going to read this. It's a folk tale, and we've already read this before, and I know you love it because of the big bad wolf. So we're going to read this story and then retell it. A long time ago, in a simple cottage beside the deep dark woods, there lived a pretty child called Red Riding Hood. And there she is. She was called Red Riding Hood because of this red cloak. The cloak is a type of cape or coat that you can wear with a hood. They called her Red Riding Hood. One afternoon, Red Riding Hood's mother called to her and said, "Grandmother isn't feeling well. Would you like to take her some goodies?" And Red Riding Hood, yes, I would. She loved going to Granny's, but that meant that she had to go through the woods. So after the mom was finished getting the goodies ready, she told Red Riding Hood, "Be careful and don't talk to any strangers." Now remember, a stranger is somebody that you don't know, so they can look nice. They're not going to look scary. A stranger doesn't look scary. It might look like a Miss Marlene. If you don't know them, if you've never met them before, they're a stranger. Like I was a stranger before your mom and dad brought you to the classroom or before I came to visit your house. Before long, Red Riding Hood was in the deep, dark forest. "Oh," she said, "this is scary." Suddenly, a large wolf appeared. And he said, and he's like, "Where are you going, little girl?" Should she talk to him? And she tells him, "Oh, gracious me. Mama told me not to talk to strangers." But the wolf had such charming manners, that means he was so nice, that Red Riding Hood decided to talk to him. And she says, "I'm taking some goodies to my grandmother because she's not feeling very well." And I noticed that in this story, the wolf is carrying the goodie basket. So in this version of the story, the wolf is like, "Okay, I'm going to go with you. How about I escort you? I come along with you to keep you safe to go to Granny's." It's probably not a good idea. After walking, they got out of the forest and they saw some sunflowers. And the big bad wolf told her, "Why not pick a few flowers for your granny?" She said, "Granny loves flowers." But while Red Riding Hood was picking the flowers, the big bad wolf hurried to Granny's house. Now we know what's going to happen because we've read this story before. Let's see. So the wolf knocked on the door, and you can see Granny's feet in the window. And she says, "Who is it?" And he said, "It is I, your delicious darling granddaughter," said the wolf. "The door is unlocked," said Granny. So the wolf is going to go in. "Surprise!" cried the wolf. And Granny said, she was furious, "Get out of here, you horrid thing." And if you notice, Granny was reading, so she wasn't happy at being interrupted in her book. But the wolf gobbled Granny right up. He didn't even bother to chew. "Tasty," he said, patting his belly. "So tasty." Just then he heard footsteps, so he knew that Red Riding was coming, and he said, "Here comes dessert." And he put on Granny's cap and her glasses. A long time ago, women used to wear little caps to bed. Sometimes they still do. "Who is it?" he called out in his sweetest granny voice. "It is I, your little granddaughter, Red Riding Hood." And the wolf says, "The door is unlocked." Red Riding Hood was distressed at seeing her grandmother look so different. And she says to him, "Why, Granny, what big eyes you have." And he says, "The better for seeing you with." "Granny, what long arms you have." "The better to hear you with hug you with, my dear." Not hear you, hear with your ears. And she says, "Granny, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with." And then she says, "Granny, what big teeth you have." What do you think that wolf's gonna say next? "The better to eat you, my dear." Look how scary the wolf looks there. And then he gobbled her right up. And he didn't bother to chew her either. "I'm wicked," he said. "I'm so wicked." Wicked means bad. A hunter was passing by and he heard the frightful racket. And the hunter thought, "That doesn't sound like Granny." And so the brave hunter jumped in the window and killed the sleeping wolf and cut him out. They cut out Granny and Little Red Riding Hood. And Red Riding Hood promises to never talk to any more strangers. And then look, on this version, there's an alligator. And look, she's telling him, "No, I can't talk to you, stranger." And she never did. So she never talked to strangers. That's the end of our story. So we're going to retell the story together. And I have some stuff to retell the story with. Hey, there's the wolf. So I have a wolf, and I have Little Red Riding Hood. I don't have a Granny, though, so we're just going to have to see Granny in our heads. And then I have Granny's glasses. So one day, Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother said to her, "Your grandmother isn't feeling well. Would you like to take her a basket of goodies?" And Red Riding Hood says, "Yes, I would like to. I miss my Granny and I love seeing her." So Little Red Riding Hood takes the basket and starts. And before she leaves, her mom says, "Be careful that big bad wolf doesn't," or not the big, she just says, "Don't talk to strangers." And she said, "Okay, I promise I'm not going to talk to strangers." So she's walking through the woods or the forest, and she meets the big bad wolf. Now this one doesn't look very scary, does he? And he says, oh, I didn't know I could put these on my fingers. This is the first time I've used this one. He says, "Where are you going, little girl?" And she says, "I'm going to visit my Granny." And he said, "Well, there are some things here that could hurt you, so I'm going to escort you." And he carries the basket. And Little Red Riding Hood stops to pick some flowers. Now, it looks like the flowers are gone off this, but we're going to pretend. So while she's picking flowers, the big bad wolf hurries off to Granny's house. When he gets to Granny's house, he eats her up. Gobble, gobble, gobble. And he dresses up like Granny. So we're going to put the glasses on the big bad wolf. And I have a blanket here, but that'll be hard for you to see, so I'm just going to keep the glasses. It's silly. And soon Little Red Riding Hood comes to the doorway. I can't get my finger in there. Okay. And she says, "Knock, knock." And the big bad wolf says, "Who's there?" And Little Red Riding Hood says, "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood." He says, "Come in, it's unlocked." And she sees him and she says, "Granny, what big eyes you have." And he said, "The better to see you with." Then she says, "Granny, what long arms you have." He says, "The better to hug you with." And then she says, "Granny, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear." And then, what does she say? Granny, what big teeth you have. What does the big bad wolf say then? The better to eat you with, gobble, gobble, gobble. And he eats her up. And then he's so full from eating all that, what does he do? He falls asleep. And he snores. And the hunter or the woodsman comes and he knows what's happened. And so he kills the wolf and he saves Little Red Riding Hood and her Grammy. And then Little Red Riding Hood says, I promise I won't talk to any strangers again. Now, in one of our things, the woodcutter just came and shook out the big bad wolf. He shook Granny and Little Red Riding Hood out of his mouth, and then the wolf ran away. But in this version, the wolf died, so he's dead. So what you can do now is retell that story, and I know you don't have these cute little props, but you could tell your sister or your brother, if you have one, or your grandma, or your mom or dad, the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and tell it in order. Bye.